What is going on, guys? Brad here with Haunted Awakening, and today we are introducing a new series on our YouTube channel. The series will be called Haunted Awakening Unsolved, and in this series we will go over a lot of unsolved mysteries, missing 411 cases, and things along the lines of that. So if this is something that interests you, please smash the like button, hit subscribe. We're also going to be popping up another playlist here shortly along the same guidelines, but it's going to be scary stories, paranormal events, and things more of that nature. Make sure you stick around and enjoy. So today, guys, we are going to be talking about the Villisca Axe Murder House. We thought, what a better story to start the series off with, since we will be going there on June 24th of 2024 to do an overnight investigation. Supposed to be one of the most haunted locations in the United States. And here with me tonight, I have Chris, founder of Seekers of Shadows. You guys know Chris. She used to be with Haunted Awakening. She had to move kind of far away and start her own channel. Chris, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you tonight, Brad?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to go over this case study we have here. We can kind of get a good gist of what we're walking into when we go down there at the end of the month. All right, so I'll get started here on a short case study that I have written up. Kind of goes over the details of what actually happened that night. And then I think we'll get into the suspects. And then after that, we will let everyone know what our theories are. And then, guys, feel free to comment down below what you think. On June 10th of 1912, in a quiet town in Villisca, Iowa, tragedy and mystery struck the peaceful town. So events leading up to that night is Sunday the 9th. Josiah, also known as Joe, takes wife Sarah and 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, to the children's service at the Presbyterian Church in Villisca. With them was, I hope I'm saying this right, Lena? Or Lena? Do you know, Chris?
I am not sure, to be honest.
Okay, I think it's Lena. Lena and Ina Stillinger. They were friends of, I'm assuming, Catherine. They lived a few blocks over. They joined them that night at the Presbyterian Church service, which was pretty much just the end of the school year service event, kind of congratulating the kids on their school year and graduating. Nothing too extensive. The service ended with a social get-together at around 9:30 p.m. The Moore family and the Stillinger girls, which had asked their parents to spend the night at the Moore house, which is the Villisca Axe Murder House, walked 3 blocks back from the church to the house at around 9:30 when the event was kind of ending. They stopped for the night to have some cookies and milk in the kitchen, and then called it a night, and everybody went to bed. And then shortly after midnight, they speculate, someone had entered the Moore residence, but not before picking up Joe's axe from the backyard. And I have heard some people say they think that the killer had done this prior to them leaving the service and was waiting in the attic. But I was reading that some of the local authorities say that could not have been, because you'll kind of put it together when we get into the suspects. The person that the local authorities have kind of leaned towards was at the event. They kind of ruled out that the killer was in the house prior to them going to bed. With Joe's axe in one hand and a lamp in the other, he made his way up the stairs with an unerring knowledge of the layout of the house. They say he moved through this house quickly and quietly, as if he knew the layout already. At the top of the stairs lay Joe and Sarah Moore, sleeping soundly in their bed, and at this point he bludgeoned Joe and Sarah to death, striking them approximately 20 to 30 times each, not with the sharp end of the axe, but the blunt backside of the blade. And they say he did this because he did not want the sharp end of the axe to get lodged in the victim, which is kind of crazy because he ended up going absolutely wild. And in the house, you can see marks on the wall from where on his backswing he was hitting the wall and the axe was getting stuck in the wall. So after this, after he brutally murdered Joe and Sarah without waking anybody, which I want to add is weird because that could not have been a quiet event if you think about it, especially with the proof of how forcefully he was performing these acts. After he murdered Joe and Sarah, he walked down the hall to the kids' room. Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul were sleeping. He then proceeded to murder the 4 more children in the same fashion. He then walked downstairs to the guest room on the first floor, where the Stillinger children were sleeping, and committed the same gruesome act. So aside from the murders, there's some interesting things that the local law enforcement took note of that are not really a part of any regular crime scene, of any regular murder crime scene, I guess I should say. The killer had left a 2-pound slab of bacon leaning against the wall next to the axe. He had used clothes and bed sheets from the dressers to cover all the mirrors in the house. And on the kitchen table, he left a plate of uneaten food and a bowl of bloody water. The local authorities are not sure why he left a plate of uneaten food, but they believe he washed his hands in the bowl of water and just left it there. A couple other facts about this case. All the victims' faces were covered with a bedsheet or clothing and laid on their backs in bed. Although Lena Stillinger was posed in a provocative position with her gown pushed all the way up, but tests showed that nothing else was done to the girl. Lena is also said to have wounds on her arm indicating there was self-defense struggle and a blood stain on her knee, which they're not sure where that came from. And something that is very interesting here, it doesn't lead me to believe that there was kind of some corruption going on, but the local law enforcement, before any tests were able to be done, I don't even know if fingerprinting was around in 1912, but the local law enforcement had let all the townspeople just trample through the crime scene, and people were in there taking souvenirs. Somebody had actually taken a small piece of Joe's skull and kept it. Not sure why they let people do that, but it severely hindered the testing that would later happen to try to find out who did it. So now with the main gist of the story, Chris, do you have anything to add? Anything you think is weird?
Something I read about or seen on one of the shows is that slab of bacon to the girl that was laid out provocatively. It was said that he used the bacon to relieve himself.
Okay, I think I heard the same thing. I think they came to a conclusion that is what the slab of bacon was there for, and that's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, I'd agree. The other thing is that bloodstain was on the inside of her right knee, and they think it's a handprint or a defensive wound from her trying to fight him off.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that would definitely make sense. So, without further ado, let's get into the suspects. The first suspect is Frank Jones, a local businessman that was a rival to Mr. Moore in the farm equipment sales business. Moore had worked for Jones for 7 years prior and then left to start his own business, so they kind of had a rivalry going on. And down in this area of Iowa is a huge farming community, so definitely some competition going on there. There was no proof of this, but there was a rumor that Joe Moore was having an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law. And although there was no proof, the town people all knew about the deep hatred between Joe and Frank, but a few of the townspeople had said they could not imagine that it would ever escalate to this type of crime. So the police had no leads on Frank and no reason to believe that Frank was the murderer. Now, the next suspect has a little bit of history and kind of more fits the role of a person that would commit this crime. The next suspect is someone that actually confessed to the murders of the family, but later withdrew his confession, claiming that the police had beaten him until he confessed. His name was Reverend Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly. He was an English immigrant who had a history of sending obscene material through the mail and mental illness. He admitted to being in town the night of the murders, and he also admitted that he left early in the morning after the crime was committed, but stated it was work-related that he had to take the train out of town. The main points of interest about Kelly that the police took notice on was Kelly was left-handed, which was determined by the blood splatters and the axe marks on the wall. The police say the killer had to have been left-handed. He had a history with the family, that being he was watching them at the church and kind of spying on them while they were around town. A bunch of the townspeople came forward and said they have noticed that he had a special interest in this family for whatever reason. A couple other interesting things. A few days after the murders, a dry cleaner had said they received bloody clothing from Kelly, and I could not find anywhere reading about this story if they ever pressed him about this and what he said about it. So I'm not sure if they questioned him or if they kind of just dropped it when they kind of decided it was him. And he also reportedly asked the police officers after the crime for access to the house, posing as a Scotland Yard officer. After long hours of interrogating him, he confessed to the crime with details, but recanted this in front of the jury, claiming police brutality is the only reason he confessed, and then after that, the jury refused to indict him. Now, the last suspect. This suspect is known as the Midwest serial killer. There is some proof that he was going around via train, and there was also some other murders that kind of lined up with Villisca that he was said to have committed. Researchers believe the serial killer traveling by train is a plausible explanation for not only the murders in Villisca, but other random axe murders throughout the country. Most are quick to rule out Henry Lee Moore as a good suspect. However, in other cases, similar to Villisca, robbery was just not the motive. Some signatures of other crimes are missing, though, such as covering the victims' faces. Crime researcher Beth Klingensmith has suggested that as many as 10 incidents have occurred close to a railway, such as Villisca. The other cases that most fit Villisca, and they were said to have been committed by the Midwest serial killer. The Colorado Springs Axe Murders of 1911. On September 17th, 1911, 4 members of the Burnham family were murdered with an axe in their home. Henry, his wife Blanche, and their 18-month-old daughter Lula had been murdered in the same fashion as the Villisca family, and there is some evidence that the killer in Villisca may have tried to conduct a second murder. The Monmouth Axe Murders of 1911. On September 30th, 1911, William Dawson, his wife Charity, and their 13-year-old daughter Georgia were bludgeoned to death with a heavy pipe in their beds while they slept. This crime had distinctive similarities to the Villisca Axe Murders. Paola, Kentucky Axe Murders of 1912. Just 6 days before the Moore family murders in Villisca, Roland Hudson and his wife were found murdered in their beds, killed by an axe. Their faces were covered, and the murder weapon was left at the scene, just like Villisca. The window shades were drawn and the doors were locked. Very similar to Villisca. That is something I forgot to mention earlier. The killer in Villisca had taken the keys from the house, locked the doors when he left. And the last one, the Axeman of New Orleans, 1918 to 1919. A series of brutal axe murders occurred between 1918 and 1919. It was said to be an unidentified killer known as the Axeman. The killer targeted victims in their homes while they slept, often attacking them with an axe or blunt objects. While the geographic distance is significant, the brutal nature of the attacks and the fact that they involved axe murders have led some to speculate these murders to be connected to Villisca. Now we get into the fun part. With all the information you have heard here tonight, Chris, is there any one of the suspects that you are leaning more towards?
I think it was the Reverend Kelly. Another fact about whoever did it had to have been short.
This is true. I've been to Villisca once, and the ceilings there are not very high. So to full swing an axe with the force he was above your head, they definitely would have needed to be short. I think I agree with you 100%. Reading the story and the suspects, Frank Jones and the Midwest serial killer, their connections were really short. The paragraphs I read about them, everything I read about them was pretty short. And then you read about the Reverend, and it was just like a full documented page of why they thought it was him. And I do think it was him. He had a connection to the family. He was left-handed, which they said the serial or the murderer was. He was seen spying on the family multiple times, and the bloody clothing that he brought to a dry cleaner. I'm no rocket scientist, but reverend work does not seem like a profession where you would get blood on your clothes, such as a butcher. And the fact that I know he was beaten, but the fact that he just confessed. I mean, if I did not commit a crime, even if they were trying to beat it out of me, I would just keep telling him, look, you got the wrong person. I did not do it. But the world may never know. This is still an unsolved mystery. And hopefully when we go there at the end of the month to do our paranormal investigation, we can get some evidence through our devices.
I've been reading this book, The Man from the Train. There's
Okay.
about 4 chapters in Villisca on it, and it actually goes all the way into the investigators and the different people that went through the house and the trials. It has all of it in it.
Okay. Awesome.
A lot of it points back to him as well. Another thing you got to ask yourself too. So you were talking about the man in the train. How long do you think in 1912 it took to get from Kentucky to Villisca, Iowa by train?
Right. That is very true.
It was a coal-based train. You couldn't just travel like that.
Yeah, it probably would have taken a while, not to mention, how many stops in how many cities they had to make.
Right, and it wasn't like he walked up and paid for a train ticket. He was jumping the trains. So I just don't foresee 6 days being enough to get from Kentucky to Iowa.
No, I agree 100%, especially back in 1911. That would have been very difficult. And, if you put yourself in the mindset of a serial killer, why going from a town in Kentucky, why randomly pick going all the way over to Villisca? Wouldn't you kind of want to stop in towns here and there and do your thing?
Right, there should have been more murders between the 2 states.
Right, kind of like a little trail. I read a thing that said he kind of left a little trail. And I'm not 100%. I would have to check a map, but I don't think Villisca was a plausible spot to connect the dots on that trail. I don't think it was him. I know some of the stuff fit what he did. Like one of the cases, he covered the faces and he murdered them with an axe. But if you think about it, back in the early 1900s, probably 99% of people that owned a home owned tools like this because they just did their own stuff. So all these people had a wide variety of tools. And back then, crimes like this were kind of unheard of. So they're not thinking twice about, I'm just going to leave my axe outside and my door's unlocked. That's just how they lived back then, because especially in small towns like Villisca, things like this were unheard of.
Well, not only that, but most people back in the 1900s were church-going people. Everybody in your family went to church. It was, we didn't work Sundays. We went to church. So I think covering people's faces just shows remorse.
And covering the mirrors, like he was ashamed of himself. He didn't want to see himself.
Kind of also fits Reverend Kelly because he had mental issues. He was in and out of a mental hospital. I think they said he was schizophrenic.
Yes, yeah, he was schizophrenic. He stayed at a mental institute in Washington, D.C. for, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think they said 2 years. I just want to know how he got a job as a reverend with that background.
I think back in the early 1900s, even up into the 1960s and 70s, it wasn't very hard to be that kind of person and insert yourself into community. There's other major serial killers that were like big, huge parts of the community.
That is very true. I do remember reading that about Ted Bundy, I think it was. He was very liked among his peers in his community.
Same with John Wayne Gacy.
Right.
He would throw parties and have people over and celebrate.
Yep. That's crazy.
Hiding in plain sight.
Yep. It really goes to show you really don't know people sometimes. All right, so we agree we think the suspect is Reverend Kelly. Let us know in the comments down below who you think it was, or if there's some people that I maybe didn't mention. I did read an article. It didn't go too into depth, but it did say there was other suspects. If you want to see more videos like this, smash that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to follow us both on TikTok as well. We both go live quite often doing the spirit box sessions for people that you guys all love. And let us know in the comments what our next video should be. Till next time, stay safe and stay healthy.